this?
Well, as you mentioned, it's a blockade, but this is probably the most dangerous blockade. There are 400 US bases encircling China. They start in Australia, they go through the Pacific, they go up through Japan, Korea, across Eurasia. It's like a giant noose around China. Missiles, warships, low-draft warships, which can approach China just outside Chinese waters. The provocation, I mean, it is extraordinary. It's not only a blockade, it's a blackout. Apart from you and I discussing it, and here and there in the media, but usually on the World Wide Web, the blackout of this situation around China has been almost total. You have the biggest build-up of US air and naval forces since the Second World War. That's an extraordinary story that has simply been suppressed. I mean, in a way, the film is about the news, the perception that we're given, where we're not allowed to know these important and very disturbing events. We use, from the BBC, various news reports, the BBC, CNN, Fox and others, near the beginning of the film, which are all about, as I think the BBC report says, China's ambitious plans to fortify the South China Sea, build airstrips in the South China Sea, and indeed it is building airstrips in the South China Sea. But another blackout has been on the biggest military exercise in living memory, and that was Operation Talisman Sabre, which the US last year, 2015, the US led, and in which they rehearsed the blockade. So this constant provocation. Well, I mean, what we're talking about here with this blockade of China is really a nuclear threat. We're back at the few minutes to midnight in terms of the possibility, the prospect of nuclear war, in which the Pentagon's Law of War manual now says it's okay, in effect, to use nuclear weapons. So we have the provocation of the newest major nuclear power.
And the Marshall Islands?
The Marshall Islands figure in this because the Marshall Islands is where the nuclear age began, where something like the equivalent of one Hiroshima, with China as its target. And this base, in its surveillance, in its missile firing, commands the Pacific all the way to Asia and China. So it's a major part of the necklace of US bases. Well, Okinawa has 132 US military installations. I haven't been anywhere quite like it. It's like the term aircraft carrier is often used, but this is. People who live there are permanently fenced in, and they're fenced in by US bases. There is a very active and very vibrant anti-bases movement, but from these bases, the US has attacked, well, goes right back. It's attacked Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, today, Afghanistan, Iraq. But its significance now is that it's 400 miles from China. And all these bases are aimed at China. Yes, Japan is not really an independent country in terms of foreign policy. And most of its bases in Japan, most American bases, are on the island of Okinawa. Japan has a very nationalist government, are saying some very extraordinary things. There's a great deal of provocation there. The point about all of this, you know, is that I don't think anyone wants nuclear war or even a war between great powers like the US and China. But what is happening here is the laying of ground, a landscape of potential mistakes and accidents. And as they worried that the decision to retaliate, we're back to that almost a strange world which we worried about or at least an earlier generation,
12 minutes for the whole
worried
world,
about. But we should be worrying about it again. And with a change of president in the United States, it could go either way. I'm not sure which way it'll go, but it's a very fragile period.